Usually when we talk about a pilot learning to fly, there's this underlying expectation of total clinical control.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they put you in this state-of-the-art flight simulator. You have your pristine dashboard, the digital horizon is perfectly level, the wind conditions are dialed in by a computer sitting in the next room. It's fundamentally an engineering problem.
Completely controlled.
Exactly. You pull the yoke back 14 degrees, the nose pitches up exactly that much. I mean, the instructor points at a dial, taps the glass, and tells you that if you just follow the checklist, you get the right result.
And the math works.
The math works perfectly every single time. It feels clean. It feels solvable.
Well, the human brain craves that kind of environment. I mean, we are pattern-seeking machines, right? And when we're presented with a space where variables are visible, categorized, and beholden to a strict set of rules, it creates this profound sense of psychological safety.
Oh, for sure.
We truly believe that if we just memorize the manual, we are insulated from failure.
But then you step out of that multi-million-dollar simulator and you get in the cockpit of an actual physical airplane.
And that's where the trouble starts.
Right. And suddenly you're dealing with this massive, unpredictable crosswind that definitely wasn't in the weather briefing.
Yeah.
A flock of geese flies across your path. The air traffic controller is speaking way too fast over this crackly, static-filled radio, and there's a weird vibration coming from the left wing that, wasn't in the manual.
No checklist for the geese.
Exactly. That perfectly clean, predictable simulator model just shatters. You're suddenly looking at an atmospheric landscape that is, well, absolute chaos. And the checklist alone isn't going to save you.
Because navigating muddy waters requires an entirely different cognitive toolkit. The neat formulas break down because the environment is no longer sterile. The variables aren't controlled by a computer anymore.
No, they're not.
They're subjected to the laws of physics, weather, and frankly, chance.
And that exact feeling, that stepping out of the clean, predictable simulator and into the messy, unpredictable storm is exactly what we are getting into today. So, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
We are talking directly to you, the listener. We know why you hit play. You're the learner. You're that person who is constantly trying to bridge that frustrating, sometimes terrifying gap between the beautiful theoretical knowledge you read in books and the messy, boots-on-the-ground execution required out there in the real world.
The stuff that actually matters.
Exactly. You want to know how things actually work when the training wheels come off and the manual is totally useless.
The corporate landscape is just littered with people who have completely mastered the instruction manual.
Oh, probably.
They have the degrees, they know the terminology, they can build the models, but they completely freeze the moment a real-world variable changes. Exploring that gap isn't just an academic exercise. I mean, it is the fundamental difference between building a sustainable career and basically stalling out in middle management.
And today, we have a fascinating piece of source material that tackles this head-on. We're working from a comprehensive study summary of a really foundational text. It's Mark H. McCormack's book, What They Still Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School.
A classic.
Truly. And just to be clear on our parameters for you listening, we're working from a study guide that distills the absolute core essence of McCormack's arguments. Our mission today is to extract the most critical, practical business skills from this text. We're going after the skills that are almost entirely ignored in formal academic settings, but are absolutely vital for sheer survival out there in the wild.
The term street smarts often gets a really bad reputation in corporate environments.
Yeah, it sounds a bit shady.
Right. People dismiss it as something inherently unteachable or perhaps vaguely cynical, like it's just about being manipulative or something.
Yeah, like you're pulling a fast one.
Exactly. But the source material aggressively reframes that. It positions these so-called street smarts as a very specific, highly actionable set of skills. The overarching concept we're unpacking today is the realization that technical knowledge, the stuff you are tested on in a classroom, is never enough on its own.
It just isn't.
It might be the prerequisite that gets you into the building, sure, but it is not the engine that drives you upward.
We all have this illusion, though, right? This quiet hope that if we just get the right degree, or, I don't know, learn the Python script or memorize the right spreadsheet formulas, we'll be bulletproof.
It's a comforting thought.
It is, but the text completely shatters that. It forces us to look at the illusion of the classroom versus the reality of the actual room, the room where the decisions actually happen. And looking at the overview and the conclusion or source text, the central thesis is stated outright. It says business success depends on practical judgment and real-world experience, rather than just classroom learning.
Making sound decisions under profound uncertainty, that's the primary driver of success.
So let's break that down. Why does the classroom fail us so spectacularly here?
Well, look at the concept of the variable. The inherent limitation of any formal training environment, whether that's a university seminar, a corporate onboarding module, or, weekend workshop, is that it relies on controlled variables.
Right.
Classrooms trade in neat retrospective case studies. You're presented with a problem that has, by definition, already been solved. Or you're given a scenario where all the pertinent information is just magically collated and handed to you on a silver platter.
It's like reading a murder mystery, where you know the author has planted all the clues in the first 3 chapters. You don't have to worry about whether the clues exist. You just have to find them. The boundaries of the game are completely set.
Exactly. The classroom presents you with, say, Company X. You get their quarterly financials, their precise market share, and a detailed brief on their competitor. The professor asks, what should they do?
And you just plug it in.
Right. You crunch the numbers, you apply a Porter's 5 courses framework, and you get an A. But real business is defined by profound, sometimes terrifying uncertainty. You're dealing with irrational actors. You are dealing with incomplete data.
Always incomplete.
Always. You almost never have all the numbers, and you absolutely never know the true hidden motivations of the people sitting across the table from you.
That makes me think about music, actually. Formal business education, getting the degree, learning the terminology. It's basically like learning to read sheet music.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. You sit in a quiet, temperature-controlled room. You learn what a quarter note is.
Yeah.
You memorize the scales, and you play exactly what is written on the page in front of you. If you hit the right keys in the right order, your game's successful. You get the A.
And that is the perfect encapsulation of technical knowledge. It is deterministic.
But then, actual business is like being thrown onto a stage with a jazz band in a smoky, crowded, loud club. There is no sheet music anywhere. The bass player starts a riff. The drummer shifts the tempo unexpectedly because, the crowd is getting restless. The trumpet player goes off on a wild tangent, and sudden, instantaneous improvisation is absolutely mandatory.
You can't just play your scales.
No. If you just sit there on your stool trying to play your rigid, memorized scales, you are going to ruin the song and get booed off the stage. You have to listen, adapt, and play the music that is happening right now in the room, not the music you practiced in your bedroom.
And that jazz improvisation is the core of what the source calls practical judgment. The study summary points out that technical knowledge gets you the job. It gets you into the jazz club.
It buys you the instrument.
Yes, it gets you the instrument. But practical judgment dictates whether you actually survive the performance. Technical knowledge is just the baseline entry fee.
Oh, let me push back on that hierarchy for a second, or maybe just reframe the entire premise here.
Yeah.
Because we always hear these things called soft skills. Yeah, understanding people, adapting to the room, communicating effectively. And we call things like financial modeling, coding, or supply chain logistics hard skills.
Right.
But based on this text, are we labeling them completely backward? Like, is it possible that technical knowledge is actually the easy part, the cheap entry fee, and that these so-called soft skills are actually the hard determining factors of the game?
Based on McCormack's conclusions in the text, we absolutely have the labels backward. The text explicitly states that practical judgment, emotional intelligence, and relationship management are as important as technical knowledge. But honestly, in the context of high-level success, they are the sole differentiators.
Wow.
Because anyone with a certain baseline of intelligence can be trained to run a complex spreadsheet. It's just a matter of time and repetition.
It's just a formula.
Exactly. But not everyone can be trained to read a room, since that a key stakeholder is secretly terrified of a new initiative because it threatens their department's budget, and pivot a pitch in real time to alleviate that unstated fear without ever mentioning it directly.
That is wildly complex.
It is a massively complex, nuanced capability.
Because humans are so deeply weird and unpredictable. I mean, I want you, the listener, to think about a time recently where you had all the perfect data. You had a flawless plan. The PowerPoint deck was a work of art.
We've all been there.
The math was undeniably correct and the ROI was massive, but you pitched the project, and it still went completely sideways. It just died on the vine. Why?
It wasn't the math.
No. It all certainly wasn't because someone found a math error on slide 12. It was because of unforeseen, unquantifiable human factors. Someone's ego was bruised because they weren't consulted early
That
enough.
department felt structurally threatened.
Exactly. Or maybe the timing just collided with the vice president's bad mood after a terrible commute. The perfect, pristine classroom model shattered the absolute second it made contact with real, messy human beings.
And since unpredictable human factors are precisely what break those neat classroom models, our focus has to shift entirely to how we manage those factors. We need to look at McCormack's primary solution to this chaos. Like, how do we actually learn to play in the jazz band?
Right. If the problem is people, the solution has to be people. The study summary gives us some incredibly direct lessons here. We are looking at Lesson 1, which states that relationships create opportunities. Lesson 2, which advises us to listen more than we speak.
Huge one.
Huge. And Lesson 6, which tells us to read people carefully and adapt. The core takeaways here are to build a strong professional network and improve communication every single day.
Let's strip the corporate gloss off those words, though. Networking and communications sound like the titles of the most tedious HR seminars ever designed.
Ugh, yeah, passing out business cards over lukewarm appetizers.
That's exactly. Forced happy hours. But what McCormack is outlining here is a highly sophisticated, active data-gathering strategy. Let's look at networking through the lens of Lesson 1, that relationships create opportunities. A relationship in this context isn't a transactional buzzword. It is an established, high-bandwidth channel of trust.
Okay, a channel of trust.
Yes, when you have a genuine relationship, people tell you the truth. They tell you about these structural problems they haven't made public yet. They tell you about the massive opportunities that aren't posted on any internal job board.
So the relationship is the physical infrastructure that allows the opportunity to travel from them to you.
Right.
Without the wire, the signal can't even reach you.
Exactly. So how do you build that infrastructure? That brings us to Lesson 2, listen more than you speak. And the psychology behind why we speak is fascinating, especially in a corporate context.
How so?
Well, in the classroom environment we talked about earlier, you are heavily rewarded for speaking. You raise your hand, you give the correct answer, you prove how smart you are, and you get the grade. We carry that deep behavioral conditioning directly into the business world. We go into meetings desperately wanting to dominate the airwaves, to prove we justify our salary, to prove we belong in the room.
Oh, man. We think talking equals value. Like if I am talking, I am contributing. If I am silent, I am invisible.
Yes. But McCormack is arguing that this is a massive strategic error. When you are speaking, you are giving away information. You're revealing your hand. When you are listening, you're acquiring information.
Which is much more valuable.
Definitely. Listening more than speaking gives you what economists call an informational asymmetry. You are learning the other party's needs, their constraints, their hidden fears, while you are systematically protecting your own strategic position.
That makes me think about a radar dish on a military ship. Like, its entire job is to spin around quietly, continuously receiving incoming signals to paint a comprehensive real-time picture of the battlefield.
Like that.
Yeah, it needs to know where the islands are, where the other ships are, what the weather is doing. If that ship suddenly starts broadcasting a massive, incredibly loud radio signal, if it starts speaking nonstop, it actively jams its own radar.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It physically cannot receive incoming nuanced signals while it is transmitting at full volume. And worse, not only is it blinding itself, it is broadcasting its exact location and intentions to everyone else on the map.
So when you walk into a room and immediately start pitching, talking, and dominating the conversation, you have jammed your own radar.
Totally blinded.
You have absolutely no idea what the terrain of that room actually looks like, and you've telegraphed your entire agenda to people who might use that information against you. Lesson 2 is basically a mandate to keep the radar dish spinning silently.
Okay, so the radar dish is spinning. We're listening, we're gathering all this raw data. That brings us to Lesson 6, read people carefully and adapt. This implies we need to actually process all that raw data we are listening to and synthesize it into action. But here is a serious practical pushback for you. How can anyone actually practice reading people daily without driving themselves completely clinically insane?
Well, elaborate on what you mean by that.
I mean, if I sit in a high-stakes meeting and try to consciously analyze every single micro-expression, every twitch of a client's eyebrow, every time someone shifts in their chair or crosses their arms, I'm going to lose my mind.
Oh, sure.
I'll be so overwhelmed playing amateur forensic psychologist that I'll completely miss the actual content of the meeting. I won't hear a word they're saying because I'm too busy wondering if their crossed legs mean they are feeling defensive. So how do we do this practically without paralyzing ourselves?
Yeah, if you overanalyze to that microscopic degree, you freeze. You cause a cognitive overload. The key isn't to become a human lie detector analyzing facial tics frame by frame. It's about establishing baselines and simply noticing deviations from those baselines.
Baselines and deviation.
Yes. When McCormack says read people, he's talking about paying attention to macroscopic patterns over time.
Okay, give me an example of what a baseline deviation looks like in a normal meeting.
Let's say you have a weekly standing meeting with a project manager. Their baseline behavior is usually highly vocal, very detail-oriented, and they always jump in to clarify timelines. That's their normal state.
Got it.
If, during one specific meeting, an entirely new software integration is brought up, and that usually vocal project manager goes completely uncharacteristically silent, that is a massive data point.
Oh, wow.
You don't need to know exactly why they are silent in that exact moment. You don't need to analyze their eyebrows. You just need to note that the terrain has fundamentally changed. A deviation has occurred.
You just noticed the temperature of the room just dropped 10 degrees.
Yes, and then you adapt. Maybe instead of pushing for an immediate committee vote on the software, you pause the agenda, soften your approach, and say, let's table the final decision on this until next week so we can all review the specs.
You diffuse it.
Exactly. You've read the room, noticed the unstated friction, and adapted your strategy to prevent a blowup. That is emotional intelligence in action. And it's a muscle that you build over time, which ties back to the takeaway of improving communication every single day. It's a daily practice of noticing deviations.
So if you're listening to this and you're sitting in your next Monday morning stand-up,
Yeah.
look around. Who is dominating the airwaves? Who usually speaks but is suddenly quiet? Your next major career breakthrough, that promotion, that game-changing client, it is almost certainly not going to come from building a more complex spreadsheet in isolation.
No, it isn't.
It is going to come from a well-nurtured relationship where you turned on your radar, noted the deviation, truly listened to someone's underlying needs, and adapted your approach to solve a problem they hadn't even verbalized yet.
But gathering intel and building trust is only half the equation here. Once you have an accurate map of the room, you face the next, much more aggressive hurdle. How do you leverage that deep understanding into a tangible, signed agreement? I mean, intel is useless if you don't know how to deploy it when it is time to close the deal.
So how do we actually execute the win? The source material gives us highly evolved perspective on this. We're looking at lesson 3, which states that negotiation is about creating value, not only winning. And we're pairing that with lesson 5, which emphasizes that timing and preparation matter.
Crucial combination.
The overarching takeaway, provided in the summary, is to prepare thoroughly before meetings.
Prepare thoroughly. It sounds almost insulting in its simplicity, doesn't it?
It really does. It sounds like advice a high school guidance counselor gives you before a history exam. Do your homework.
Right. But in the context of high-stakes negotiation, this specific type of preparation is the literal difference between life and death for a deal. Let's unpack lesson 3 first. Creating value versus just winning. We have to contrast this with the traditional, culturally ingrained view of negotiation.
The cinematic view. The 1980s Wall Street mentality where negotiation is warfare.
The zero-sum game. In a zero-sum mindset, there is a distinct winner and a distinct loser. The resources are finite. If I extract an extra $1 from you, that means you physically lost $1.
Right.
The entire goal of the interaction is to aggressively, ruthlessly extract maximum concessions from the other side until they break.
I always picture that kind of zero-sum negotiation as a brutal game of tug-of-war over a muddy pit.
Oh, that's a perfect visual.
We're both pulling on the exact same rope. If I pull you an inch closer to the mud, I am winning. If you pull me an inch, you are winning. It's purely antagonistic. All our energy is spent fighting each other's direct force.
McCormack argues that this tug-of-war is fundamentally flawed and ultimately destructive, especially if you care about long-term success or repeat business. Lesson 3 insists that negotiation is about creating value, and this requires a profound cognitive shift. It means you are not standing on opposite sides of a mud pit pulling a rope. You are standing next to each other, looking at a heavy object that neither of you can lift alone.
So instead of a tug-of-war, value creation is like two people realizing they can build a pulley system.
Exactly.
You bring the rope, I bring the wheel. We rig it up together, and suddenly we can lift an amount of weight that would have been mathematically impossible for either of us to lift in isolation.
And the only way you can figure out how to build that pulley system is if you have successfully executed the lessons from the previous section.
The radar.
Yes, you have to have kept your radar spinning. You have to
Right.
know they even have a wheel in the first place. You have to have read their baseline to know they want to lift the object as much as you do.
But how do you actually execute that value creation in the live room, under pressure? I mean, this brings us to lesson 5, timing and preparation. How does preparing your notes correlate to finding the right time to suggest building the pulley system?
Well,
Because I usually think of timing as a mystical element. Like you just happen to catch the boss on a Friday afternoon after they had a great lunch, so the timing is good.
viewing timing as pure luck is a massive mistake. Timing is an engineered outcome.
Engineered.
Think of it this way. Human cognitive bandwidth is strictly limited. If you walk into a complex negotiation completely unprepared, if you don't know your numbers, if you haven't modeled the outcomes, if you're winging it, your brain is going to be running at 100% capacity just trying to process the basic facts of the discussion. You are overwhelmed.
Your radar dish is completely jammed again,
Hmm.
but this time by your own internal panic.
Exactly. Because you are scrambling, you will completely miss the subtle, fleeting shifts in the room. You won't notice that the other party just casually, almost accidentally, mentioned a severe supply chain issue they're having in a totally different division of their company.
Right, because I am too busy frantically flipping through my own disorganized notes
Yeah.
to hear what they're actually saying.
But if you are deeply, thoroughly prepared, if you have internalized your own goals, researched their likely constraints, and mapped out multiple different scenarios in advance, your brain is free.
Your bandwidth is open.
Your cognitive bandwidth is wide open. You aren't scrambling. So when they casually mention that supply chain issue, you instantly recognize it not as random small talk, but as a massive glaring window of opportunity.
Oh, I see.
Your preparation allows you to see the invisible clock in the room. You realize that now, in this exact second, is the exact right time to offer them a logistical concession on your end in exchange for a longer contract term on their end.
You just built the pulley system.
You just built the pulley system. You just created value, and you only did it because your deep preparation gave you the mental space to seize the timing.
Preparation frees up the mental bandwidth required to actually be present in the room. That's powerful. But I have to bring up a major risk here because I've seen the dark side of preparation. Isn't there a massive danger of being over-prepared?
What does overprepared look like to you?
Well, I've seen junior executives walk into negotiations with a literal 3-inch thick binder full of scripts, decision trees, and laminated flowcharts.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they've prepared a scripted response for every microscopic detail. But because they are so desperately married to their preparation, they become incredibly rigid.
Ah, yes.
The moment the live dynamic of the meeting goes off script, the moment the client asks a question that isn't in the binder, or going back to our analogy, the jazz band suddenly changes the tempo, they completely freeze, they panic, they can't adapt because they are terrified of abandoning their perfectly prepared plan. Does hyper-preparation actually destroy your ability to adapt?
You are identifying the critical difference here between brittle preparation and resilient preparation.
Brittle versus resilient.
What you just described, the binder full of rigid verbatim scripts, that is brittle preparation. It's an attempt to turn the chaotic real world back into the sterile, predictable classroom simulator.
It's a security blanket.
It is an illusion of control, and it breaks the moment it faces unexpected pressure.
It's like clinging to the sheet music while the jazz band is playing a completely different song.
Exactly. Resilient preparation, the kind McCormack is advocating for, doesn't create a script. It creates a deep internalized understanding of the parameters.
The parameters.
You don't prepare what you were going to say verbatim. You prepare by deeply understanding what you fundamentally value, what you are completely willing to concede, and what your absolute non-negotiable walkaway point is.
So you know your boundaries.
Yes, and resilient preparation actually creates flexibility. Because when the conversation suddenly swerves into uncharted territory, you know exactly where your boundary lines are, which means you can safely and creatively improvise within them. Brittle preparation shatters. Resilient preparation allows you to bend without breaking.
Resilient preparation allows you to bend without breaking.
That is the key. So you, as the listener, evaluate your own habits before your next high-stakes calendar invite. When you have a tough negotiation coming up, do you just glance at the agenda 5 minutes beforehand and hope your natural charisma will help you survive the hour? A risky game.
Very risky. Or worse, Do you write out a rigid script that will fall apart the second you get interrupted? Or do you prepare your parameters so deeply that you have the mental freedom to actively spot the timing and build a pulley system in real time?
That mindset shift from just trying to survive an isolated meeting to actively creating lasting value is the bridge to the next major concept in the text. Because a single successful negotiation, no matter how elegantly you built the pulley system, is just one isolated moment in time.
Right. Winning one single game doesn't mean you win the championship. And winning one negotiation doesn't mean you have a successful career. To sustain success over a decade or a lifetime, you have to transition your focus from chasing short-term wins to building long-term equity.
The study summary groups several incredibly powerful lessons together here that address this exact transition. We're looking at Lesson 4, Reputation as a Long-Term Asset. Lesson 7, Focus on Execution. Lesson 8, Learn continuously from failures. And Lesson 9, Lead with trust and accountability. The summarized takeaways emphasize thinking long-term when making decisions and staying continuously curious and adaptable.
There is a massive, fascinating tension between two of these specific lessons. Look at Lesson 7, Focus on Execution. Execution is inherently immediate.
Right, it's about today.
It's about getting things done right now. It's about meeting the Friday at 5:00 p.m. deadline, hitting the quarterly quota, shipping the product right now. But Lesson 4 tells us that reputation is a long-term asset. It is built over decades. How do those two things actually interact? Because in the real world, the intense pressure to execute immediately often forces people to take aggressive shortcuts that can permanently damage their long-term reputation.
That tension is the central tightrope walk of any modern career. What's fascinating here is that the synthesis of these two lessons reveals a symbiotic relationship. Reliable execution is the raw material that builds a long-term reputation.
Interesting.
You cannot build a solid professional reputation on good intentions, brilliant theories, or charming networking alone. You build it by consistently delivering on your promises. Execution is the brick. Reputation is the house.
Ah, I see.
However, the critical caveat, and this is where practical judgment comes back into play, is how you lay the bricks.
Right. Did you burn down the entire department, lie to a vendor, and scream at a junior analyst just to get the project shipped by Friday at 5:00 p.m.?
Exactly. If you execute a project by cutting ethical corners, deceiving a client about the product's capabilities, or betraying your team's trust, you technically achieved the short-term execution. You hit the deadline.
You shipped it.
But you actively detonated the long-term asset of your reputation. The text urges us to think long-term when making decisions. That means asking yourself a very specific filter question before acting. Will the way I am executing this task today make these people actively want to work with me again 5 years from now?
That's a great filter. I like to compare a professional reputation to a financial credit score. I think it makes the abstract concept very tangible.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
A credit score is painstakingly hard to build. It takes years of consistent, boring, on-time payments, which in our corporate world means consistent execution, honesty, and reliability. But it is incredibly easy to destroy. One major default, one massive lie to a client, and the score plummets overnight.
And why does a high credit score matter? It isn't just a vanity metric.
No, you eventually need it. In business, your reputation credit score is absolutely essential when you need to take out a loan of trust from colleagues or clients in the future.
A loan of trust. I like that.
Yeah, if you need a massive favor, if you make a genuine mistake and need grace, if you are pitching a highly risky new idea that doesn't have data to back it up yet, people are going to internally check your reputation credit score before they decide to back you. If the score is low because you have a history of burning people for short-term, selfish wins, you get denied, the loan doesn't clear.
Having a high reputation credit score dramatically lowers the friction and the cost of doing business. When people fundamentally trust you, which links directly to Lesson 9, leading with trust and accountability, everything moves exponentially faster.
No red tape.
Right. You don't need a 100-page ironclad contract for every minor interaction because your word has historical weight. Accountability is simply owning your actions, which proves to the market that you are a safe, reliable investment.
But let me play devil's advocate here, speaking for the reality of the brutal modern corporate world.
Okay, let's hear it.
We live in a hyper-fast, hyper-competitive culture. Everything is driven by quarterly earnings, monthly sales quotas, and the demand for immediate gratification. The average tenure at a job is getting shorter and shorter. In this pressure cooker environment, is focusing on a long-term asset like reputation actually a luxury? Yeah. Is it a luxury that someone, say a junior salesperson, just trying to survive their first year and hit quota so they don't get fired, simply cannot afford. Can they really afford to sacrifice a short-term necessary win for a long-term abstract concept like reputation?
That is a very real observation of the current corporate climate. I mean, the immense structural pressure to sacrifice the future for the present is everywhere. But the principles in McCormack's book strongly suggest that sacrificing your reputation for a short-term win is the ultimate false economy.
A false economy.
It is a fatal miscalculation. It is not a luxury. It is a baseline survival imperative.
Explain the math on that. Why isn't it a luxury?
Because the professional world is infinitely smaller than we think it is, and industries are incredibly densely interconnected. You might hit your quota this quarter by deceiving a client into buying something they don't need.
You got your bonus.
You survived the quarter, sure, but you will inevitably lose that client when they realize they were tricked. And worse, they will talk. The purely transactional zero-sum approach has a very short half-life. Soon, you will literally run out of people willing to do business with you.
You burn through all your leads.
Yes.
Yeah.
Focusing on your reputation isn't some soft, moralistic luxury. It is cold, hard, long-term self-interest.
The chickens always come home to roost. It might take 3 years, but they always come back.
Always. And this perspective ties directly into Lesson 8, learn continuously from failures. If you are playing a short-term game, failure is catastrophic. It means you lost the immediate prize.
Right.
But if you are playing the long game, failure is simply a necessary data point.
Because if you're utterly terrified of failure, you will never take a risk, and you will never innovate.
In the classroom model, a failure is an F on a test. It is a permanent, shameful stain on your academic transcript.
It's the worst thing that can happen.
Exactly. But in the real world of practical business, failure is an essential feedback loop. It is the real world telling you that a specific part of your strategy was disconnected from reality. The takeaway is to stay curious and adaptable.
That makes sense.
When a long-term thinker fails, they don't try to hide it or shift the blame, which would instantly destroy trust and lower their credit score. They own the failure openly, they analyze the data, they adapt their approach, and paradoxically, their reputation actually grows because people see they are resilient, accountable, and capable of learning.
They become anti-fragile. They get stronger when things break. So I want to prompt a serious pause for self-reflection here for you listening. Look at your own decisions over the past 2 weeks. Look at the emails you sent, the promises you made in meetings, the corners you maybe thought about cutting to get out of the office earlier.
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. Ask yourself this very simple, brutal question. Are my quick, short-term decisions making deposits into or withdrawals from my long-term reputation bank? Because eventually, an audit is coming.
It is a sobering thought, but an essential one for anyone who wants to survive past the first few years of their career. And it brings us to the culmination of everything we have discussed today. We've talked about the inherent limitations of technical knowledge, the absolute necessity of reading the room and keeping the radar dish spinning, the art of creating value through resilient preparation, and the vital compounding importance of playing the long game. Now we need to weave all these disparate threads together.
We are moving into the ultimate synthesis. Strategy meets emotional intelligence. This is where we bring listening, executing, negotiating, and relationship building into McCormack's final grand equation for success.
We're focusing heavily here on Lesson 10, which states that success combines strategy with emotional intelligence. And we're tying that directly back to the overarching conclusion of the study summary, that practical judgment, emotional intelligence, and relationship management are just as vital as technical knowledge.
The grand unified theory.
This is the grand unified theory of the entire text.
Strategy plus emotional intelligence. Why do these two specific elements have to coexist? Why isn't one enough to get you to the top? Let's break down what actually happens when you only have one side of the equation.
Imagine a professional who possesses absolutely brilliant strategy, but has zero emotional intelligence. They understand the macroeconomic market perfectly. They have built a flawless, mathematically beautiful 5-year plan.
The spreadsheets are gorgeous.
Their financial models are genius level.
They have all the technical knowledge in the world. They are the perfect pilot inside the perfect simulator.
But they lack EQ. What happens when they step out of the simulator and try to implement that brilliant strategy with a team of real humans?
Disaster.
They don't listen to their department heads. They steamroll through negotiations because they think their math makes them inherently right.
Oh, I've worked with that person.
We all have. They completely ignore the unstated fears and anxieties of their clients. Their brilliant strategy is entirely rigid. It is tone deaf. And inevitably, it shatters upon contact with human unpredictability. The team quietly sabotages the rollout, the client walks away feeling insulted, and the brilliant strategy fails. Not because the math was wrong, but because the human execution was fundamentally fatally flawed.
That is the immense danger of strategy without EQ. You are right, but you are entirely alone, so you fail.
Exactly.
What about the reverse? What if you have massive emotional intelligence, but zero strategy?
This is an equally dangerous trap, though it looks much friendlier on the surface. Imagine a person who is incredibly well liked by everyone. They listen beautifully, they build deep, trusting relationships with every single department, they read the room perfectly and ensure everyone always feels heard and validated.
They sound like an amazing colleague, the kind of person you want to grab a coffee with.
They're wonderful to be around. But without strategy, they are completely directionless. They can build a massive network of relationships, but they have no idea how to leverage that network to actually create value, which violates lesson 3.
Right.
They are so worried about protecting everyone's feelings and maintaining harmony that they actively avoid making the tough, unpopular execution decisions required by lesson 7. They are universally beloved, but ultimately they are totally ineffective. They are the captain of a ship where the crew is having a fantastic time, morale is through the roof, but the ship is just sailing in endless circles in the middle of the ocean.
I think I have an analogy for this grand equation that brings it all home. It feels like the difference between a map and a vehicle.
Walk us through that.
Strategy is the map. It shows you the ultimate destination, the topography, the most efficient route from point A to point B. It is the analytical, high-level plan. But emotional intelligence, the ability to read people, adapt to the weather, build trust, and negotiate obstacles, that is the vehicle. You can have the most accurate, detailed, beautiful map in the entire world. But without a functioning vehicle to actually navigate the physical terrain, to drive over the potholes and steer through the storms, you're just a person standing perfectly still in the dirt, staring at a piece of paper.
And conversely, if you have a massive, powerful, top-of-the-line vehicle, all the EQ in the world, but you have absolutely no map, you are just joyriding.
Exactly.
You will burn through all your fuel, have a very pleasant drive, and end up absolutely nowhere.
You cannot succeed without both.
The perfect dynamic fusion of the map and the vehicle, of high-level strategy and deep emotional intelligence, is what McCormack ultimately defines as practical judgment. Practical judgment is the rare ability to look at the map, realize the bridge ahead is washed out, use your vehicle to navigate a muddy off-road detour, and still arrive at the destination on time.
You improvise.
Yes. It is knowing exactly when to adhere strictly to the analytical plan and exactly when to throw the plan out the window and rely entirely on human connection and improvisation.
Practically speaking, though, nobody is perfectly balanced. We all lean one way or the other. How can someone recognize if they are personally out of balance?
Yeah.
What are the specific warning signs that you are over-relying on strategy at the expense of EQ, vice versa? How do we self-diagnose our own imbalance?
This is perhaps the most important practical application of this entire text. If you want to spot an imbalance where you are over-indexing on strategy and lacking EQ, look for friction. If your projects constantly hit mysterious, unexplainable roadblocks, if people smile and say yes to your face in the meeting but then quietly drag their feet on the actual execution, if you feel like you are constantly having to drag your team across the finish line by sheer force of will and authority, you have a great map, but your vehicle has flat tires.
Oh.
You are failing to build trust. You are failing to read the room. You lack EQ.
People say yes in the meeting but drag their feet. That is a massive red flag. It means your relationships are hollow and your radar dish is jammed. Okay, what about the warning signs on the other side?
The warning signs of over-indexing on EQ without strategy look like stagnation. If you have a massive, sprawling network of contacts, but you are never actually closing any deals.
You're just chatting.
Right. If you sit through countless pleasant meetings that end with everyone agreeing to touch base again next quarter, but no actual action items are generated. Or if you feel completely overwhelmed and paralyzed by trying to please everyone and can't prioritize your own divisional goals, your vehicle is running smoothly, but you have thrown away the map. You lack strategy.
Friction means you need more EQ. Stagnation means you need more strategy. That is incredibly clarifying. We challenge you to do a mental audit of your own skill set right now. Be painfully, uncomfortably honest with yourself. Which side of the equation do you naturally lean toward?
It's hard to admit.
It is. Are you the rigid, brilliant strategist who causes friction? Or are you the aimless, beloved empath who is stagnating? And more importantly, what is one tangible physical step you can take tomorrow morning to strengthen your weaker side?
Action is what matters.
Exactly. If you are causing friction and need more EQ, maybe tomorrow you practice lesson 2. Go into a meeting and vow to speak 50% less than you normally do. Keep the radar dish spinning. If you are stagnating and need more strategy, maybe you apply lesson 5. Spend an extra hour mapping out the strict parameters of your next negotiation so you aren't just joyriding.
It is entirely about active conscious integration. Because as the conclusion of the source explicitly states, it is the combination of these elements that dictates true business success. The classroom, the simulator won't teach you this balance. You have to forge it yourself out there in the reality of the room.
Let's do a quick recap of the massive territory we've covered today. We set out to close that frustrating gap between classroom theory and street-smart reality. We learned that the real world is a chaotic jazz club, not a predictable flight simulator, and that practical judgment is the ultimate hard skill.
Absolutely.
We discovered that networking isn't about passing out business cards. It's the infrastructure for gathering vital data, and that listening is keeping your radar dish spinning to find informational asymmetry. We threw away the zero-sum tug-of-war and realized that true negotiation is preparing so resiliently that you can find the timing to build a pulley system and create entirely new value.
The pulley system changes everything.
It really does. We explored the deep tension between short-term execution and the long-term compounding asset of your reputation credit score. And finally, we saw that you need both the map of strategy and the vehicle of emotional intelligence to actually arrive at your destination.
It provides a remarkable, cohesive framework for navigating the inherent, terrifying chaos of human interaction in business. It completely removes the cynical mystery from street smarts and breaks it down into daily, actionable disciplines.
To you, our listener, thank you. Thank you for being the learner, for bringing your intense curiosity, and for taking the time to explore the messy, complicated, endlessly fascinating reality of business with us today.
The commitment to digging deeper is what separates the long-term winners from everyone else.
Before we let you go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. Something to chew on as you navigate your own meetings and negotiations this week. Throughout this entire deep dive, McCormack's lessons have focused heavily on how you must actively adjust,
Right.
how you must carefully read the room, how you must adapt to other people's needs, how you must build the relationships and navigate the uncertainty. But think about this. What happens when you play the long game so incredibly well and you build such a massive, undeniable reputation credit score that the entire power dynamic actually flips?
Oh, that's an interesting pivot.
When your reputation becomes so large that it precedes you into the room before you even sit down, do you still need to constantly adapt to others? Or does reaching the ultimate pinnacle of success mean that suddenly the entire room starts adapting to you? It is something to think about. See you next time.